looking back at how Theresa May essentially lost complete control of not only the Conservative Party, but tried to essentially bridge the gap between the moderate Tories and the hard right ERG leavers. One thing was very clear of when essentially she could no longer face that much pressure, and that was when the papers turned against her. Yes, it was the papers that very often are the big barometer, especially to the Tory party, even though they are pretty much controlled, especially the right-wing press in this country, is pretty much controlled lock, stock and barrel by big billionaires, and is not in any way truly independent in the way that a press should really actually be. Because imagine this. What if a story came out about Murdoch that was newsworthy? Do you think the Daily Mail is going to cover it? No. Do you think the Times is going to cover it? No. They might cover it, but it won't be front page news. It'll be hidden away somewhere. And it won't be that negative. It'll be at best. So it's really the true barometer of when especially the Tory press, which is normally like the big cheerleaders, is now trying to sell, especially the Tory middle class, who are the main buyers of these newspapers, that Theresa was no longer the leader that was needed to run Britain, and that it was time for her to go, so that new leadership could come in and sort out all this mess. And of course, that's how we ended up with Boris. And of course, of recent times, not only has Boris now, even though he's, quote, technically united the party, there are now more hard-right ERGers and leavers in the party, more so than ever. There is still a somewhat moderate Conservatives left, and as you saw recently, there was a massive rebellion. These people threatened to not vote for the bill, but also you have the hard ERGers who are still trying to push Boris to basically just full-on abandon with the withdrawal agreement, which we said just a couple of months ago that this was their plan in their initial launch. We saw a targeted campaign to try and get this pushed into the mainstream media. We saw it enter into press, and this is now entered into the Leaver lexicon of, we can just walk away from the withdrawal agreement, it'll be fine. Not so much. However, as we have continued, not only has Boris just been proven to be completely incompetent, we are now getting to the stage where the press are starting to turn against him. And this is very often the key indicator of how long a Tory Prime Minister, how long their days they have left. Now, I've often said I've got 3 departure dates for Boris. We've got Christmas, maybe April, May time of next year, and then the big wild one is somehow, because Boris has survived worse scandals than this, somehow Boris's longevity somehow keeps him in the game, somehow, I don't know how, but he manages to make it roughly through to the next general election, but doesn't decide to continue as Prime Minister because the pressure on him to step down is just far too great, because the Conservatives are already considering Boris to be a massive liability. So this is just going over just how the fact of Boris is just completely sinking. So the title of the article is "Sinking Without a Trace. Right-wing press turns on Boris Johnson." Where's Boris? Asked this week's Spectator, the weekly magazine the Prime Minister once edited and from which Johnson might have once expected a better press had it not been for the corona crisis. With the front cover image featuring a distant blonde dot on a tiny bobbing rudderless oarless on a stormy sea. The message of chaos and drift from the title was emphatic. A criticism of the Prime Minister's leadership in the battle against the pandemic that has been replicated across an increasingly sceptical right-wing media. The question now is whether he can become a proper leader with a sense of direction and purpose, said the magazine's editor, Fraser Nelson, effectively arguing that Johnson's premiership was at a crossroads, that a narrative was close to being set. After a week in which Britain's test and trace system, once intended by the Prime Minister to be, quote, world-beating, was at a point of collapse, Nielsen asked whether the pattern we have seen in recent months of disorder, debacle and rebellion, U-turn and confusion is what we should expect here henceforth. Others writing in the same magazine put it more idiosyncratically. What on earth happened to the freedom-loving, twinkly-eyed, rapscallion character I voted for? Oliver Hardy has left the stage, replaced by Oliver Cromwell, said columnist Toby Young, complaining of a lack of engagement with the detail. And he's just like, whoa, Toby Young. And I know Toby Young's quite infamous for this, but Boris was never about the detail. Are you insane? Are you just not aware of his track record? Earlier on Thursday, on the same day, the Spectator cover emerged. The Daily Mail had also reached a similar conclusion. Boris, we've failed. The front page headline blared, with a paper claiming it had warned of a, quote, looming test crisis 5 months ago. The right-wing tabloid highlighted Johnson's subdued performance the day before in front of Parliament's liaison committee, where he had been forced to admit that the short answer was that there was nowhere near enough COVID tests available. Only a week earlier, the Prime Minister talked optimistically about a, quote, moonshot plan to test millions of people a day as a way to return to pre-coronavirus normality. He had to humiliatingly be forced to admit that they were nowhere near that level of tests for worried parents at a level of close to 230,000 a day. Too often, the government has overpromised and underdelivered. What a cracking phrase for the, I'm sure, the coming many years to come, definitely, on this government. And it concluded in a leader in the Times on Friday morning. Policies have been swiftly abandoned after the exposure of an entirely predictable problems. The centre-right broadsheet continued, adding the A-level fiasco and the problems with the contact tracing app for good measure. The paper, perhaps with one eye on a promotion for the former Times journalist Michael Gove, argued that Johnson needed to appoint competent deputies before the public come to a settled and unflattering view about his ability to do the job. It was a few months after another surprising general election win in 1992 that John Major's reputation was shredded on Black Wednesday. But for all the growing criticism and the pandemic policy failures, the situation is nowhere near as grave for the current Prime Minister. The Conservatives currently remain ahead in the polls at just over 40%. Neither the Tories nor the Mail nor the traditional right-wing titles are talking about switching their support to Labour's Keir Starmer, and there remain good arguments that the British public takes far longer to change its mind than Britain's fickle and fast-moving press. Pollster Deborah Modson, author of a new book, Beyond the Red Wall, that analyses Johnson's seizure of the Labour strongholds in the last December's election, said that Red Wallers, though disappointed, are more forgiving than you might expect. They have taken a big decision to leave Labour and are seeking to justify that. And there you have it. I don't think this is nowhere near going to be the trust. I don't think this is the Conservatives are going to re-win these red wall seats. But we'll have to see come that next general election. But the big one will be the local elections, because you currently have Labour majority controlled councils and a Conservative MP. And you've only got to look at, again, things that are going on in Wakefield, the Wakefield Express for the time being. people who are constantly writing about to their MP saying, what on earth are you doing? This new guy who just came in, and of course, recently, I believe he was one of the quote rebellious, but he didn't actually vote no against the internal market bill. He just abstained from voting. And as far as I'm concerned, any Tory who abstained during that vote might as well have just voted yes. There's very little you could do about that. But as we all know, a lot of them are trying to protect their hopefully flourishing political careers. That's what they're trying to essentially do. But like I say, local election times will come a big test for how strong these things are. And even though Deborah there says that, oh, these people are forgiving, I'm not really so sure, because you've had the corona crisis, which has constantly hurt these areas incredibly. You've not only got the furlough scheme that's going to end in October, which is going to hurt these areas even more. You've then got a probable October budget that is going to push even more austerity. Do you think that these red wallers, as they were called in this article, are going to forgive the Conservatives for doing this to them, promising a better and brighter future and to, quote, level up the region? No, they are not in any way going to be forgiving in any way whatsoever. And many of these people remember, obviously, what happened in the 80s with Margaret Thatcher. And they are now seeing this Tory government deliver complete and incompetence in just general governing and able to rule. There are questions being asked. Should there be started to push for a campaign to basically force another general election? Was what's been come to known as a 3.5% movement. That could potentially, I don't know, we could see that gather pace, but again, who knows? But anything could happen, I suppose. But I'll tell you what, a lot of those red wallers, they're going to go straight back into the wall, because there's no way that they are going to forgive the Tories, let alone Boris, for what the damage that's being inflicted upon them. And trust me, if you don't know any proper Northerners are very loud and they like to be very vocal. And trust me, come election time, they will make their voices heard. So with that said, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.